Really honored to be invited to present here. This has been a great conference, and I've learned a lot. And it's always amazing, and I'm here to talk about mobile health technology. But it's amazing how many medical meetings we go to. We never hear from the patients, and so we talk about it all day long. So thank you to the patients for coming and teaching us. So I'm going to talk about mobile health technology and apps and wireless health devices. As the title would sort of imply, I'm not really talking too much about social media. I'm going to stay with the stuff I know about, and hopefully that's interesting to you all. So a long time ago, which is to say 2007 and before, every doctor had one of these. In fact, I had that very device, the BlackBerry. And of course, people know the moniker for that, and it was a good reason. They were incredibly powerful and useful devices. And they pretty much rule the enterprise world. They rule the healthcare world. And everybody knows that that can't last forever, because on this particular day, something happened. And I want to know if anybody remembers that date. That's right, because that's me sitting in line at the bottom right. And of course, that's the day the iPhone hit the world. And it was not a small event for anybody interested in the technology field. Now, of course, everybody's interested in mobile technology because they're all pervasive. But between 2007 and the next year, 2008, something important happened, which was when the iPhone launched. Steve Jobs stood up and said, we have made this great phone. It's got these great apps on it. You can do anything you want on it. And if you want to load an app on it, just go to a website. And we have these great technologies for web apps. And people said, no way. So a year later, just a year later, they released their own SDK, or software development kit, such that anybody can build an app. And that was exactly 1 year later. And on the stage at the Worldwide Developers Conference, where Steve Jobs announced the iPhone 2.0, were two companies in the medical world. And it's amazing that they were there at the front door. Hippocrates was there with their iPhone app, and MIM Imaging, at that time called MIM Vista, was on the stage with Steve Jobs talking about their mobile radiology app. So the age of medical apps is equal to the age of the really smartphone app world. And within a few years, this is now almost a year old, thousands of medical apps were on the App Store, on the iOS, and now, of course, a lot of them on the Android market. That's 9,000 and 6,000, and those numbers climb daily. Which, of course, makes it hard for anybody trying to find a good app to find the one that's interesting to them, and hopefully one that is valuable and accurate. And that's how we started. iMedical Apps started in 2009 with just one person blogging, and then I joined and another joined. So now we're a whole bunch of docs and editing and creating a whole lot of content. And in these couple of years, we've grown a fair amount, and now we're over 500,000 page views a month, and we're over 10,000 Twitter followers and over 6,300 Facebook fans. And we're still growing. We're still developing all kinds of new content lines, and we're looking to engage and be involved more with our readers. And I should take this opportunity, as this is a social media meeting, to invite you all to our tweet chat on Wednesday nights. This has been really fun, a lot of great exchanges. So Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on the #mHealth hashtag, so please join us. So in the medical world, physicians and all healthcare professionals, nurses, and everybody else are getting more and more engaged with mobile technology. And there's been all kinds of surveys that come out. In 2011, somebody said 80% of physicians have a smartphone or a tablet. And then even more recently, people have looked at the distribution of smartphone usage. And not surprisingly, ED physicians have the highest usage, because those are sort of on the front lines and dealing with a lot of unknowns and sort of reuse their smartphones to get information, cardiologists, urologists, et cetera. The big news in the last couple of years, of course, has been the iPad, and the iPad presents a really kind of an important change in computing period, not just mobile, but just computing period. And a very recent survey said 62% of physicians have an iPad, and half of those use it at the point of care. And it's going down the line. And as you guys probably already know, medical schools are giving these out on matriculation. And those are just 4 that I know about, and I'm sure there's others that are making the iPad an integral part of their curriculum. And that makes perfect sense. In terms of medical education, it's an obvious advantage to large binders of photocopied pages or extremely heavy and expensive textbooks. And of course, they can seg right onto clinical support and other things that mobile technologies can do. So first, as I kind of go through things I wanted to talk about today, I was going to show you a few highlights of medical apps. And I'm really going to be emphasizing the provider side of things. As you would imagine, there's an important facet of mobile, which is patient-facing, and that's what you've been hearing about. Great information from John D'Souza and, of course, from the patients here. But on the provider side, the biggest adoption, as you would imagine, is for general apps, meaning apps that serve all physicians. And right now, to the best of my knowledge, the largest footprint is from Medscape, which launched in 2009. And as you can see from those download numbers, they just announced last month that 2 million downloads, which I believe is, I don't know, a couple for every doctor in the country. And it's got two important facets. It's got two important features. First of all, it's really comprehensive, all kinds of drugs, drug interactions, pill IDs, and even all kinds of, like you can see there, interaction checkers, et cetera. And the other one is that it's free. Right? So two important things. But even small shops have had tremendous success. And MedCalc is one of the better calculators out there by a physician, actually two physicians, one of them being a developer. A two-man team within a year had 800,000 downloads, and it's probably the single best calculator out there now still. So a lot of traction. Now, when you go into the subspecialties, specialties and subspecialties, the numbers thin out, and this is kind of one of our sore points because while everybody can use Medscape, if you're really working day to day and you're an oncologist or you're an orthopedic surgeon, you'd love to have things that really work well for you. But here's a couple of good things that are already out there. We just highlighted these. Everything is almost all on our site, by the way. So DermaMap, really cool new app for dermatologists. You can put in a rash and go through some tabs and get some good information on it right away. In the super specialty world, Tumorpedia for bone and soft tissue tumors. It's my favorite app. No, it's actually a really good app. It just goes through a lot of information about the different bone and soft tissue tumors. And you imagine just how subspecialized the audience for that is. Medical education is booming, as you'd imagine. There's kind of a built-in audience, right? I mean, thousands of medical students in desperate need of information. And then the textbook publishers are sort of encountering the pretty severe wall of resistance to paying hundreds of dollars for these multi-volume textbooks. And they're struggling with the business model and how to publish and make money. So for the biggest titles, it does make sense to move to a digital format because there's still a large audience. So Harrison's just this year came out on the Inkling platform, which is a really interesting interactive platform for publishing. It allows you to put not just text, but graphs and videos and all things like that. And it looks beautiful on Inkling, so we just reviewed that. Of course, great use for mobile technology and great graphics, as you would see on the iPad, is Anatomy. So there's a plethora of Anatomy apps. We've reviewed a bunch of them, but they're beautiful. You can rotate them. They're in 3 dimensions. You can sort of tap, quiz yourself. I mean, completely beats the sort of the photocopied syllabuses that we grew up on. And then now the journals are moving into this. And the journals have a better business model because it's recurring. There's a lot more advertising revenue available to them. So they'll probably do well on the mobile. So New England Journal took its time to launch an iPad app, but they finally came out with one about 2-3 months ago, and it's beautiful. They did a really nice job. You can sort of tap and sort of blow up the graphs, and you can do searching across the entire New England Journal. They made it easy to share, just all the kinds of things that you guys are used to, all of us are used to from reading content on the iPad in general. And we have a very nice review of that too. Couple of interesting apps I wanted to show, which kind of show you, I think, some of the promise of what you can do with these devices, which have not just, of course, email and web capacity, but built-in sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes, and of course, cameras and fairly sophisticated GPUs or graphic processing capacity. Here's a very simple app, which I thought was super clever. We talked about a while ago. This allows you to measure an angle on an X-ray, which doesn't sound that exciting, but as an orthopedic surgeon who's doing reconstructive work, something you might have to do on a day-to-day basis. So this orthopedic surgeon in England coded this up himself, and what it does is it takes the image from the iPhone camera, which is looking at the X-ray, just a simple old X-ray. You hang it on the wall, and you point your camera at the X-ray, and it does some visual processing and says, "I think this is the bone," and you say, "Well, I agree with that. That is in fact bone number 1." And then while you're holding the camera at the wall, you sort of rotate the camera slightly, or you rotate the phone slightly, and you say, "I think this is the other bone." It says, "Yep, I agree." And you push a button, and it tells you the angle, because there's an accelerometer which tells you what the position of the bone is. So now it's very simple. Instead of going out and getting your grease pen and the rulers and the protractor, you just use your. So just a very simple application. Here's another one that was just recently published and highlighted on our site called Dr. Mole. I believe this is also out of the UK, and This guy actually, the developer actually came on our site and commented that he'd never written a mobile app before. He just did this as a lark, which is just incredible if you think about it. But what this does is you take a picture of a mole, and it does analysis. It does graphical analysis of the mole. And it looks at, as you can see, a few simple criteria: asymmetry, border irregularity, and color with a U. Regularity. Not terribly complicated if you think about it, but in the medical literature, those are the fastest that determine if a mole is malignant or not. And they're well established. And he just pulled out the textbooks and just plugged it into his equation. And one of our editors just opened a dermatology textbook, downloaded this free app, and pointed the camera at page after page of moles, and it got it right. So this is actually something that's going to be really useful for patients and physicians. Unfortunately, I believe the FDA will probably be looking for him soon. He doesn't know that yet. This is a class of apps that I use all the time. This is mobile radiology apps. Like I said, Mobile MIM, which is the one on the top right, was on the stage with Steve Jobs in 2008. And recently, Resolution MD came out with their mobile device. And these are just amazing things. You can look at CTs, MRs, do 2D reconstructions on the fly. And MIM has a cloud back end, so you can sort of upload your pictures from whatever source it is. In my case, I have a desktop computer, and then I upload, and then you can get it from anywhere. So I'm routinely looking at my patients' X-rays and MRIs the night before surgery. So after dinner, I sort of pull out my iPad and kind of just get ready for the next, and that just wouldn't happen. So I'm more prepared, because I have more time to look at my stuff. Resolution is actually really interesting. That's kind of another frontier, whereas all the processing is going on board with MIM. Resolution does the processing on a server and then pushes the image via the cloud, meaning that the hardcore image reprocessing, 3D reconstruction is being done by some really big computer, and you just see the image on your phone. So they show on their demo, you can do these sort of, as you can see on that picture, 3D fly-throughs on a phone or an iPad, which is just unimaginable, and the lag time is almost nothing. And one of the big ones, these guys also launched before the iPhone, but they moved quickly to the iPhone, and now they're on multi-platforms. They are FDA approved, they are profitable, is remote monitoring. So Airstrip started off in the OB world with a simple question. If a nurse calls the OB with a mother whose fetal heart strip looks somewhat iffy, all they can do is describe what it looks like on the phone, right? It's a little squiggly, it's going a little fast. Why can't I see that somewhere else? So they developed this in Texas, and as you can see from here, they've now moved into the full suite of monitoring. So you can do through 3G, so from anywhere, you can do basically a walking ICU on your phone. So it's really compelling, and it's actually a fast-moving company. So mobile, as you can see here, provides great tools for physicians, and I think we're just beginning with the kinds of things that we'll see. But that's not all. It's also going to change, of course, as we were talking about the patient-to-physician communication. And I think this is just beginning, and there's reasons why it hasn't really taken off in many different ways, some of which have already been discussed here. But these are some of the things that are happening now that I thought I'd just mention. One is this company out of England called 3G Doctor. And honestly, I know Dave Doherty started this company, but I don't know how well they're doing. But as you can see, it's a very simple value proposition. You pay toll, you get a doctor, you do a FaceTime chat. So therefore, the moniker, the doctor can see you now. Here's a company actually right out of here in New York, and Bunny introduced me to the CEO, Gopal Chopra, which I still think is one of the more fascinating applications of mobile and communication in the realm of sort of quick answers. And this is a way for patients who have established relationships with their doctors, right, to communicate with their doctor, something is happening now, and get an answer back quickly. And the premise is that and they started in the pediatric world by asking a simple question: what group of patients or people is the most engaged in their healthcare? And the answer is easy: moms. So for moms who have questions about their child who have a pediatrician, for the pediatrician, they're getting calls all day long, right? They sort of finish seeing their 30 or 40 patients, and their desk is covered with these pink slips, right? So-and-so called, can I take this pill? Is this going to have an interaction? Somebody's having whatever. But what if you could streamline that process so the questions come in kind of pre-digested, such that they've sort of made the questions go through a sieve, such that the really nubbin of information that they need is already there. Well, then they can answer them quickly and save them time. And of course, from the patient end, then now they have access to their doctors, like this picture, what's up with this rash, and they can sort of ping their doctor via cell phone camera in an established relationship. So they're already getting great engagement. He didn't want to give me too many numbers because they're out there looking for funding, so they're sort of in a quiet period. But they're shaving 50 to 80% time, 80% of the time of a lot of patient visits, which could be handled offline. And of course, we're going to hear soon from Ben Chodor from Haptique, and they're talking about using mobile apps as a tool for patient-physician communication by the act of prescribing apps. And we're going to be looking forward to hearing more from what they're doing. So moving from apps to the phone itself as a physical device, there's some really, really cool stuff that's going on with people developing cell phone add-ons. I don't have a catchy name for that. But here's a great device. I don't know how many people saw the video for this. This YouTube video went viral, as viral as things will go in this little world of ours. But this is developed by Dave Albert, who's a cardiologist, who's a serial entrepreneur, who's developed all kinds of different devices. But he asked the question, why can't I get an EKG in my iPhone? So they developed this deceptively simple device. And what you can see on the top is the iPhone case. It simply snugly fits over the back of an iPhone. And it's got two pieces of metal, which are, of course, the electrodes. And through really clever and proprietary radio technology, sends the information to the iPhone. He won't tell me what the technology is, and apparently Apple doesn't know either. But it actually communicates with the iPhone wirelessly. So even though it looks like an iPhone case, in reality, you can put that case on your chest and put the iPhone on the table, and it works just fine. And the amazing thing about this is that now you can walk around and get strips on anybody at any time. And you think, well, that's kind of fun. I mean, maybe I'll do that 2 times on myself and I won't do it again. But now there's these great stories that are coming out, like one given by Leslie Saxon. I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's a cardiologist at USC who's the head of the Center for Body Computing. So she was early into the mobile revolution. And at the TED Med this year, she told this amazing story of how she plays a weekly tennis game with this young 19-year-old tennis semi-pro and who routinely kicks her butt. But one day, they're playing tennis and things are going fine, and they sort of take a break, and the girl starts to look really, really faint. And before she knows it, she sort of crumples and falls onto the ground. So she had her phone with her, and she had her Alive Core with her. So she ran up to her and just simply put it on her, and in 2 seconds realized that she was in an SVT, which is a super fast rhythm, which is not lethal, but can actually be converted quickly by carotid massage, which is a simple physical technique where you rub the neck on a particular location. She converted her right there. So that was a very important moment. Another great moment is 2 stories she told in the same TED Med was they passed, this conference, they do this human body computing conference, and people come from all over the world. So at the last conference, they gave out the Alive Core device to a whole bunch of people. And besides transmitting it to the phone, it actually sort of has this built-in app that uploads it to a central server. So all the heart rhythms collected are anonymously or can be anonymously uploaded. At the time, it wasn't anonymous, but so it's just kind of for fun. Every day after she gets home from work for a few weeks after the conference, she would sort of log in and kind of see what's going on and see what the various heartbeats are out there. And while she's watching the strips go by, she saw one guy having an MI. And he was sitting in Mumbai. And he's Nigerian. I don't know what that has to do with it, but he was halfway across the world. So she literally called him. It was a silent MI, and he didn't know. So that's the power of mobile technology at your fingertips right there. Here's another great company, CellScope, actually a graduate from the Rock Health Incubator, which built a couple of really cool tools. The bottom one is the one they sort of got famous for, which is a simple add-on that allows incredible high magnification using a cell phone camera and can be adopted basically to do a very cheap microscope. And you can see here, that's a red blood cell smear, but you could easily use that to detect malaria parasites. So the average microscope, of course, costs hundreds of dollars. And the phone doesn't matter. This is not an iPhone, as you can see on the bottom. So it's a few dollar attachment that can basically take a cell phone and make it into a microscope. And their latest product is the top one on the left, which is a dermoscope, or an otoscope, I'm sorry. They also have a dermoscope, which allows you, with a simple add-on, take a picture of the inside of an ear, right? Which is something probably a lot of parents would like to have, right? So if your kid wakes up in the middle of the night screaming, you can stick this in there, and you don't know what the heck you're looking at, but you can show that picture to somebody else, right? Who probably does, right? So cheap and easy. This is a great company out of the MIT Media Lab called iNetra. And I forget what NETR stands for, but it's actually a complicated acronym for ophthalmological or optical refraction, such that you can look and determine if somebody has a refractive abnormality, which is to say they're nearsighted or farsighted. And they took that sort of algorithm and they turned it backwards, such that what you do is you look at, I think, 2 dots or 3 dots on the screen of the iPhone, and then you use the buttons on the iPhone to make those dots touch each other. And by how many clicks it takes you, it can figure out what your vision is, right? So just a couple of dollars, you can test somebody's vision. And yeah, in America, we have optometrists in the mall, right? But in the rest of the world, you actually can't get your vision tested. It's actually cheap to grind glass to make an eyeglass. And there's probably people who can grind those, but they just don't have optometrists to check people's vision. So their premise is that they can basically give sight to millions of people who otherwise wouldn't have it by a couple of dollar phone attachment. One that recently made a lot of news is the IBG Star glucometer. This was in Europe, and it just recently got FDA approved in the United States. This is now, I think, bought by Sanofi Aventis, and as you can see from these pictures, it's a cell phone add-on that is this freestanding glucometer. So it's actually, if you take their glucose strip and stick it on the device on the bottom, it'll give you a reading. But if you plug it into the iPhone, the phone app launches and then gives you a running commentary and allows you to share the information with your doctor, empowering patients to check their glucoses anywhere, anytime, and share that information with their doctors. And this has now hit the mainstream. Right, so this has gone sort of from the wonky tech world and is now available at Walgreens and the Apple stores. Right, so you can go to the Apple store and buy an IBG Glucostar, which tells you the revolution is already here. And then one of the earlier ones is the Movisante ultrasound machine, which is a cell phone add-on. It actually produces really good pictures. And you can sort of get one of these handsets, and that's a holster around the phone, and then again democratizing ultrasound from a $100,000 machine to something a lot less. So those are some great cell phone add-ons that I wanted to select and share with you. But there's also a lot of wireless health devices which don't go through cell phones, and these are getting smaller and more powerful as we go. One I thought I'd start with is called iGlucose. This is a plug-in device which is compatible with many existing commercial glucometers. But the idea is that for people in remote locations who don't have otherwise an easy way of communicating the serum glucose level to their doctor, this is a 3G-enabled device. So it doesn't require a gateway, does not require any kind of home telehealth network, doesn't require a cell phone. It jumps right on the 3G network, sort of like your Kindle, and transmits that information, and also gives you analytics. And I think they just made some arrangement with HHS, I believe, or maybe one of the regional agencies to push this out to the rural healthcare providers, which obviously is a good fit. Another exciting one is called Cellnovo. They got CE mark approval, which is like the FDA in Europe, and I assume they're on the road getting it here, although I don't know the details of it. This is actually a transdermal insulin pump, right? So instead of injecting yourself with insulin on a regular basis, through that little patch that you see on the bottom left in that wireless connector, it measures and gives you the appropriate amount of insulin and gives you boluses if needed after heavy meals. And if you look at that picture, just think about how much has changed since 1963, when this apparently was the first insulin pump that was mobile. A couple of other cool devices just to mention here, to put in the commentary. The Risk Watch, and I don't know how much traction they've gotten, but it's just looks like a watch, but it's basically got it's got 2 functions. It tells you if there's been a sudden change, or obviously if you go into asystole or some dangerous arrhythmia, and wires that, and then it gives you a personal panic button. So it's kind of the help I've fallen thing, but it actually does it passively. And then that simple wrist-held ECG monitor you can see there with a cell phone add-on can give you a fairly sophisticated ECG lead. So those are 2 dedicated cardiac monitoring devices. Now, recently approved by the FDA this spring is actually an even more sophisticated device by a company called Sotera, which is out of San Diego and affiliated with or actually funded by the West Wireless Foundation, which is a wrist device, as you can see here. It looks sci-fi. It looks like one of those Star Trek tricorders, right, that you sort of hop on and gives you but it gets 5 vital signs: pulse, ECG, SpO2, and blood pressure with just that wrist and 1 wire. So the idea basically is that for the value proposition for a hospital, instead of building ICU beds, you just put these on people and they walk around. So instead of, so telemetry now becomes a much cheaper value proposition. They're not moving to the home space yet, but obviously they can if they want to. And then just a couple of examples of cell phones themselves as devices. And this actually can be, this idea can be extended, but one I thought would just be just kind of cool is just mood, right? So Mobilize is actually not a commercial company. This is actually is a PhD lab out of Northwestern. They've won a couple of awards for this thing, but the idea is that for people with mostly mood disorders, it's very hard for them to make changes to their behavior when their mood is low, right? So the idea is that it sort of regularly prompts you about your mood and then gives you back prompts of things that you said would help you feel better if your mood is low. And they've actually done a pilot study on this, and they're actually seeing improvements. So it's sort of, they call it a therapist in your pocket. Obviously, it's not going to take the role of a psychologist or psychiatrist, but this is a way, basically, your phone is your mood sensing device. A little more mathematical is Ginger.io, which has now won, I think, 3 Challenger Awards for some really sophisticated big data analysis. And their concept is that people have their cell phones within 3 feet of their body 74% of the time, or some crazy number. And your cell phone already has a lot of information about you that you don't have to ask. For example, it knows your movement, right? It probably knows your position. It knows how many phone calls you make. It knows how many apps you're downloading or using. So it gets a bunch of sort of information about kind of your status, and therefore, in a way, can act like, as they say, quote, a check engine light on your body. So it doesn't necessarily give you your glucose level, but across a large population of people, it can identify people whose health trends have changed markedly over the last few weeks or a few months. So sort of a large dashboard, as well as, of course, for research. So let me just start wrapping up by asking, so what is mHealth? And I'm not gonna offer an answer, but as you can see from what I've presented here, it's really a large spectrum of possibilities from the provider side to the consumer side, wireless health technologies, data capture, et cetera. And using the magic of Twitter, we put this out in our recent tweet chat, and we just got a whole bunch of great answers. And one of them was healthcare at your fingertips. But I really put this slide up more as a question mark, which is to say, until at the beginning of a revolution, nobody knows what to call it. So obviously something is changing. Everybody kind of feels that something is different, but nobody quite knows how to define it, which I guess means that it's probably real. So what are the barriers to sort of moving forward and really making mobile technology and mobile health the paradigm and hopefully the improvement to the patient outcomes we're all looking for? Well, we still have a need for better apps, and I would say as a specialist and as a subspecialist that we need better subspecialty apps. Medscape is great, and I actually use it all the time for the 2 drugs I need to prescribe as an orthopedic surgeon. But as a tumor specialist, I have 1 app right now, and like I said, it's all right. It's not that great, but over time, hopefully, more and more people will get engaged, and I would hope that the academic community and the medical societies get behind this and make sure that there's quality reference apps for all of us out there. The bigger one and the harder one, unfortunately, is interoperability, and the fact is that the mobile devices I've shown, the mobile apps I've shown you so far give you great information if you ask a question, but it really does not integrate into your patient's clinical data. Now, the EHR companies themselves are, of course, launching, and many of them already have, very sophisticated mobile apps themselves. But if anything, the meaningful use, and the High-Tech Act, which really just stimulated the health IT industry, I mean, just really juiced it. Probably, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but seems to have entrenched further the incumbents. So the big companies, the McKessons and the Epics, et cetera, are even stronger than they used to be. So as of now, they don't have a huge incentive for opening the gates and letting all these little companies come and play with that data. So we'll see if that changes over time. But right now, most of these data are inside proprietary silos. And then lastly, the one that we're here for is, of course, the physician-patient culture needs to evolve. And patients right now are used to, well, depending on what age group you're in, is receiving information from the doctor. But of course, as time changes, they're going to provide information to the doctor and, of course, share it among themselves. And probably, as Eric Topol, I think, has eloquently stated, that the revolution will come from the patients and the physicians will follow. So mobile changes everything. And this is, I don't think, hyperbole, because what is the most valuable company in the world right now? And that is, of course, Apple. And that's purely because of its mobile push. And really, if you look at what Apple has done since '07, they've basically put all their eggs in that basket. In the last release of their sort of flagship application suite for productivity, iWork was 2009. They're basically doing everything on mobile right now. And if you use, if you use iPhoto, if you use Keynote, which is the photo editing software and presentation software on the iPad, it really is actually a very compelling alternative. So mobile is really changing, and if nothing else, everybody knows about this, right? A 14-person company that's been alive for 14 years just got sold for $1 billion, right? So obviously the engagement you're getting on mobile is very compelling. And now we're starting to see the data slowly come in the health sphere. So obviously the academic work is always going to lag. But in this fairly well-done study, randomized controlled trial of best available glucose control using regular healthcare versus that enhanced with WellDoc's platform, they actually started to get some real improvements on that patient population. So where are we going to go to next? And now this is, they say predicting the future is always dangerous. So I would say the interoperability key is the key to adoption of mobile health technologies by providers. The patients aren't going to wait. They're there. But from the provider side, and if you have to go to 3 different places to get your job done, it's not going to be that interesting. There's just not enough time to do it. And as I alluded so far a little while ago, the meaningful use and the high-tech act is entrenched in the incumbents. So it's not obvious that the people who are the biggest players right now are going to be leading the changes. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to go on a limb and say what's going to come from is smaller, especially targeted IT providers. So if you have this great stack for an ophthalmologist or a dermatologist or a pediatrician that really incorporates these mobile tools and has some open standards and lets people build, that will come and little by little change it, and the other people will have to follow. So that's my guess. I'm going to stop here and say thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity, and I'll take any questions. Everybody satisfied? All right, thank you so much. Okay.
This or the risk management, malpractice issues.
Well, so yeah, good. I mean, two different questions, because actually you can say risk management from a payment perspective also. So payment issues, obviously, docs don't get paid to interact with patients outside the office, right? I mean, everybody knows that. So unless that changes, and there's legislation, exactly, with reform and there's telehealth legislation that allows you to sort of bill for that, and then the payers have to get on board, right? I mean, there may be an acceptable code, but people have to pay for it. But I'd say as a first step, instead of offering people money for that interaction, at least if you can offer them to save time, right? So that's an equivalent, right? Time and money are equivalent. So I mean, that's kind of the value proposition of paying MD, right? For the same amount of time, you can do more, so you actually end up making more money. So payment reform is going to lag, obviously, because there's some huge issues with that. Now, the theory out there is that if you move toward capitated models, right, you have a certain number of lives that you're responsible for, and you get paid based on their outcome, then yeah, you're right. Why wouldn't you use a WellDoc, to manage it, or a Mediva, or some very sophisticated patient panel where you can really get a bird's eye view across a lot of people, because you're going to get paid in aggregate, right? So instead of just taking care of this one person in my office, I need to look at my whole panel and make sure that everybody's doing well. Then you will need mobile and remote health technologies. So we'll see if that pushes it. In terms of risk management and malpractice, I think that's evolving. But if there's already a patient-physician relationship, it's not much of an issue, right? I mean, it only becomes an issue, and I think remotely, if you're sort of administering health without meeting the person, right? So you answer somebody's blog post with a very specific recommendation, and you're in Georgia.
Your patient Mumbai, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, malpractice hinges on negligence. Right. But yeah, I mean, that was just an unusual case, because at that point it was a trial and it wasn't anonymized. But yeah, I mean, hopefully better things will happen than bad things. Sir.
I think that is a concern, though, the liability issue related to time to respond.
Yeah.
In our practice, we implant pacemakers and the issue that we've dealt with, that all practices of cardiology deal with right now, is who's going to own that data? So if someone has an alarm that indicates they're going into heart failure, is that the implanting physician's responsibility? Is it my responsibility as a heart failure physician? Is it going to be the nurse who manages the patient? And what's the time course for response? because the data is available more and more often.
Yeah.
So I think if the liability reform addresses that issue effectively, you'll see a lot of physicians will be reluctant to move into that space in an aggressive fashion. I mean, I want the data. Lord knows that I want it. And you can argue, well, if I can address readmission rates, there may be some way of getting around that. But it's still that fundamental issue of who's going to be responsible for seeing that data Friday afternoon and getting a hold of that patient before Monday morning rolls around.
Agreed, and there's already lawyers prospecting, right? So there was a recent ad. We actually put it on our site in the state of Georgia, so it's actually not totally facetious. That this lawyer group said, "Have you been harmed via telehealth? You know, if you have, call us." Right? I mean, nobody's harmed yet, as we know. Yeah. Right.
Actually, this is directly related to your comment. If many people probably know Hugo Campos, who's one of the Society for Participatory members with me. There was a piece about a week ago in the San Francisco Chronicle about him needing to have his defib data himself. So we're not even talking about, you know, which doctor and which facility. We're talking about the fact that if he doesn't have his data, he really is not in charge of his own health. And very recently, and it sort of came up yesterday, you've got a situation where empowered patients are starting to be fearful that they might be labeled, or we might be labeled, as difficult. So it gets very, very complicated and dodgy. Yeah,
well, I mean, you already said, I mean, you would want your empowered patients to do better, right? So, I mean, I don't think that's too hard a sell to the docs to say, okay, you know, everybody's Googling stuff already, right? So just get over it. Right? So, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you want your patient helping you do your job? But it would be encouraging, I don't know how we get there, but it would be encouraging if that, you know, this concept that patients own their data, or, you know, this truth that patients own their data, also comes with some shared responsibility, right? So if your pacemaker or whatever implanted device is giving out, you know, warning signs, and that information gets sent to your doctor and the doctor doesn't respond, but you know about it and you just wait till Monday, right? You should have some of that responsibility also. So it would be great if liability reform included some of that. Great, thank you so much.